Hello and welcome. I appreciate you visiting. This is Jennifer McGuire. Today's video, I share a very simple interactive card. I call this a simple swing reveal card. The best part about it is you don't need any specialty dies. Any large die would work for this, and I have lots of examples for you. Before starting, I did want to apologize if you hear any noises in the background. We have a very full house right now, so it was hard to find a quiet spot. Okay, let's get started. I think it's best to take a look at the completed card first when it's interactive so you could see the direction we're headed. So this is a simple swing card design where an element on the front swings to reveal the greeting underneath, or you can put additional stamped images or anything you want behind it. Let's start by creating that large leaf piece. I used the new Concord and 9th triple step autumn leaf stamp set and the coordinating dies. You can use these separate or together, which I really like because you can get more from them. This product is very similar to the triple step heart design they came out with a while back that was very popular, and I did a video with lots of examples using that. So you can check that out up here on the top right, because the technique I used today would work great with the heart, and the technique I used in the heart video would work great with the leaf. Always looking for more ways to use my products. Now I'm going to start by doing a bunch of leaves, and then I'll do the swing technique later in this video. So let's start by doing the die cut leaves, mostly using the two dies you see on the left. Now these two dies are separate so that you can cut a solid leaf or also use the inside die piece to cut the little intricate pieces from the center. So I'm first cutting it once with the two dies taped together, so I end up with a leaf with the little openings. I love that fun pattern. Now over another piece of cardstock, I'm putting some double-sided adhesive. This is from Altenew, and it die cuts beautifully. So I'm putting that on the front of our cardstock sheet. Then I will take the outline die only and cut that right from the front. So we'll have a leaf with double-sided adhesive on the front of it. Now I'll remove the release paper after die cutting it, and I'll take our other die cut and put it right on top of the adhesive. So what will happen is the openings in the center of the leaf die cut will have exposed adhesive so we can inlay other colors of cardstock. Now there are a few ways you can add inlay pieces. What I like to do is die cut from another color of cardstock and just pop out any pieces I don't want inlaid in that color. So I'm popping out most of the pieces here, but just leaving a few of the leaf die cuts in the main die cut. And you'll see me do this in a moment here. So I'm popping out most things except the pieces I want to inlay. Now I'm going to lay this over our die cut. Remember, the adhesive is exposed in those open areas. And I will push those little green die cut leaves that I want to inlay right into that exposed adhesive. So I'm just pressing it down using a piercer or my finger, whatever I prefer. You can use anything. So now when I remove this green die cut, which is just laying there, lined up, all of those little green leaves will be in position, and they'll stick to that adhesive that was exposed. I then like to use a bone folder, really press them in place. This gives a beautiful inlay look. Now I'll do this with other color of leaves too. So I have a lighter green leaf here. I'm popping out the pieces that I don't want to inlay, and then I will lay this die cut over our craft one and press down the leaves that I want to inlay in this color. Now some of the leaves may fall out, that's okay. You can just put those in by hand. And I like to use a kind of tool like this. This is the Trinity pickup stick. It has like a little wax tip that allows you to easily pick up those tiny die cuts and put them where you want. Now I'll just go ahead and use the bone folder to press them in place. I'll continue to do this with other colors of cardstock too. In this case, there are just a few large orange leaves, so I'm doing those by hand instead of using the trick I just showed you. If you want to learn more about die cut inlay tricks with a similar die, you can check out that heart die video, which is up here on the top right. I have lots of things to share in there. Die cut inlay is a great way to create a smooth card if you want to limit dimension, but it also just gives a really beautiful, slick look. If you prefer, you could just layer these die cuts or put colored cardstock behind the openings and get a similar look. Okay, so I finished off. I put red cardstock for the berries, yellow for the little flowers, and I did a few more like this. In this video, I'm going to create all of our large die cuts first, and then in the end, I'll show you the swing feature. Now, because I like dimension on my cards, I am gluing additional solid leaves behind our inlay leaf, just so it'll stand out a bit on the card, and it'll also be a little bit stronger for the swing feature. Now let's create a few more large leaves, but with the stamping on it. I love how this stamp set kind of builds on each other so you can create something colorful. So I have my MISTI stamping tool, and I'm placing a sticky mat in there just to help hold my die cuts in place, and I'll link to all that below. I have a negative die cut space here of the leaf, and I'm placing that on the sticky mat. This will just help me to be able to stamp many leaves at once, as I like to do that. I'm taking the first of the triple step stamped image, and I'm lining it up in the opening of the leaf die cut. Once I have it lined up, it's very easy to do. I can close the door on my MISTI and it'll grab that stamp. Now I can pop in one of my solid leaf die cuts. I like that this has a faux stitched edge on it too. Now I wanted to do my stamping on colored cardstock, so I chose to use Tim Holtz Distress Oxide ink. Oxide inks have both dye and pigment properties, and so the pigment property of it allows you to stamp a colored ink on a colored cardstock, and the color will stay true. So here I'm stamping greens and reds on a brown cardstock, and because I chose Oxide ink, the color will show true. And I'll link to a video that describes that more if you want to check that out. So you'll see me pop in different die cuts and stamp in different colors of ink so that I can have multiple leaves, all a little bit different, once I'm done. So I'm doing all of these with the first image. I also thought it'd be fun to have a couple leaves where all of the stamping was heat embossed in metallic embossing powders. So this time I cleaned the stamp, stamped it with Versamark ink, and I'm adding silver embossing powder, and then I'll heat set it. So now I have a bunch of leaves where the first step image is either stamped or heat embossed. Now we can move on to the second image. And keep in mind, you can make one leaf or you can make 40 leaves. It doesn't really matter. I made about 10. Okay, so now I'm going back to my first leaf, and I have popped it into the die cut opening, and I lined up the second of the triple step stamps, and this one I'll stamp in a different color. This is really why I like this stamp set, because you can stamp all these images close together, but in different colors. So you can get a really fun multicolored image, and it takes very little time. And then we have our leaves with the silver embossing on it. This time I'm using Versamark ink, and I'll add gold embossing powder. So this is a great way to use those metallic embossing powders that you may have. You could use colorful embossing powders if you prefer to. Okay, now for the third and final step, and this you can see lines up very easily, and I'll stamp different colors with that. And then also for the embossed leaves, I will choose to use copper embossing powder for the third step. So you can see these are very easy to line up, very forgiving, and it makes it really easy to stamp a bunch of leaves at once. I really liked the results of these and decided to do another with a dark green leaf, and I stamped one of the three images with dark green ink, one with white pigment ink, and another with a different shade of dark green ink. And I thought it was fun to add the white ink on the dark cardstock too. So many different looks you can get from this. So now I have all of these leaves. You can see some of them are metallic heat embossed like these. Those I really like. Then we also have our colorful stamped ones on the craft cardstock, and then we have our die cut inlay leaves from earlier. Now remember, I mentioned at the beginning of the video that I will be first creating all the focal point pieces for the front of our card. Then at the end of the video, I'll show you the swing feature. So let's create some more focal point images, this time using a basic circle die, which I think many of us have. Now for this, I'm using this new Turnabout stamp set from Concord and 9th called the Harvest Wreath. What's really cool about this is there's actually 2 mini Turnabout images in here that allow you to create fun focal point images. So one allows you to create this leaf cluster, and the other allows you to create a wreath, and I'll demonstrate both of them. I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. It's easy to do, but if you want a closer look at how to use Turnabout stamps, I have a very thorough video up here on the top right that you can check out. By the way, there is a coordinating die set for this that I don't use today, but I recommend it because it has tiny little leaves, so you can create a die cut wreath or a leaf cluster also using that. Let's get started with the leaf cluster. I'm using my Concord and 9th jig, which is that square piece. You can also make your own jig, which that video shows if you want to check it out. Now the stamp set comes with this clear guide here. This guide helps you to get the alignment just right. Now I'm going to take the stamp, which has all those leaves connected together, and lay it down onto the guide, lining up the stamp with the black printing on the guide. You can see it's lined up there. Now I'll pick up this piece and line up the X on the guide. There's a black X on the background with the X that is engraved into the jig. It's kind of hard to see in the video, but there is an X on that jig, and I can lay my guide onto it so the X's line up. And then I'll put that in the corner of my MISTI stamping tool. So the jig is right in the corner of the stamping tool and the X's line up. I then can close the door on my MISTI. That will grab the stamp. I can remove that guide and save it for later. Now I can temporarily adhere any cardstock to that jig. I'm using like a 5 3/4 by 5 3/4 inch piece of cardstock. Doesn't matter what size you use. I just thought I'd go bigger so I can cut it down to whatever I wanted. I'm centering that onto the jig, and now we can start our stamping. You can use absolutely any inks you want for this. I'm using my Concord and 9th inks because the colors are beautiful. Also, Concord and 9th does a lot of color inspiration, showing suggested combinations that are really unique, and those are helpful to me. So I double stamped this green just to make it a little bit darker. And then once I'm done, I'm going to turn my jig one turn. It doesn't matter which way you turn it, just as long as you turn it the same each time. So I'm going to turn it one time, put my jig back into the corner, and move on to my second color. Another reason I like Concord and 9th inks is you can stamp them once for a nice solid light image, stamp them again for a bit darker, and you can stamp as many times as you want and it'll still stay nice and crisp. Okay, so after I've stamped that, I'll clean my stamp, I will rotate my jig and stamp my third color. So basically you're building up a background by each time turning it. Concord and 9th has a lot of turnabout stamps. I think they're brilliant, and I've done a lot of videos, and I will link to a playlist here if you want to check those out. I love the results of this, and you can do different colors to be able to create a leaf cluster for different seasons. Okay, now remember I said in this Turnabout stamp set there are 2 images. There's also the Wreath Turnabout, so let's do that one next. Now I have my clear guide that comes with the stamp set, and I'm lining up the Turnabout stamp with the clear guide. So you just line the stamp up with the black printing. Now I'm lining up the X on the guide with the X on the jig. Make sure the jig is in the corner of my stamping tool. Then I close the door on my MISTI to grab the stamp, open it up, remove the guide and save that for later with the stamp set. And now we can start stamping. I'm again starting with a large piece of cardstock temporarily adhered to the jig so I can make this as big as I want and cut it down to size. Okay, so we're doing the exact same thing we did before, so I'll go faster this time. I'm again using Concord and 9th inks, sometimes double or triple stamping to get a darker shade. I like that I have the option between light or darker. After I stamp it, I'll go ahead and turn the jig, clean the stamp, and stamp it again, but in a different color. And I'll continue to do this until we have a wreath formed. Again, you could change up the colors on this to do different seasons of wreaths, and you can add little die cuts if you want to, also to make the wreath more full if you prefer. Okay, so now that I have these wreaths stamped, the leaf cluster, and then bunches of leaf die cuts, let's do the fun simple swing reveal card design. This is so easy to do, and you can do it with many large die cuts or even cut panels. Let's first do one of the swing leaf cards. So I have a piece of cardstock that is cut to about 5 1/4 by 4 inches. I need to die cut a small hole towards the top of this panel behind the leaf. So I'm just laying the leaf on the front of the panel just so I can get an idea of where to put that little die cut circle. So I have the circle die cut with a piece of tape on it, and I'm going to place it right onto the background right about there, and then run that through our die cut machine. Next, you'll need either a small foam square or small foam circle, and you're putting that towards the top back of your die cut. This will allow that leaf to kind of swing through that opening. If you don't have a little foam circle or square, you could also glue a small button. That would work well here too. And just so you can see, this is what it looks like from the back. Ignore that stamping up there. That was something I changed my mind about. But you can see how the circle die cut opening is just a bit bigger than our little foam circle. Next, we need some dimension behind this panel so that we can have that swing feature. I have 3 pieces of white cardstock that are cut to be slightly smaller than that craft panel. I'm holding one to the back of it and tracing the circle opening on there. I'm now using a circle die that's bigger and cutting around that. Now this circle die is pretty big. I didn't need to go this big, but it worked well and I could use it for all of my cards today. So go big with the circle die, doesn't matter. I'm going to hold 2 of those white cardstock pieces together and run it through my die cut machine. That cuts a circle in the top one and then makes an impression in the next one of the circle in the same spot. So I'll line the die back up with that and put another piece of white cardstock behind it. So basically, I'm going to end up with 3 pieces of white cardstock with that circle cut at the same position at the top of each. No one will see these white cardstock pieces, so you could definitely use scraps, or maybe you stamped on a piece of cardstock and you messed it up. You can use that instead of pitching it. Then I will glue all 3 of these together. So this will just be the dimension behind our main panel, and it'll allow us to do the swing feature. Okay, now I do want to add a little stamping to that panel, just a little interest, so I'm doing a plaid. This is the Pinkfresh Studio Diamond Tile Stamp. I wanted something fast and quick and subtle on the background, and I thought this would be fun, and I used it on a lot of my cards today. So I'm putting the cling stamp into my MISTI, removing the pad, and then I have my sticky mat inside of the tool also. I'll lay my card panel upside down on the stamp, lining it up with the plaid, so it's nice and centered. Once I'm happy with the position, I can flip my MISTI upside down, and the sticky mat on the inside will grab that panel. So now I know that that panel is centered on the stamp, and when I stamp on it, it'll look nice. Sometimes this doesn't really matter, but if you have like a plaid or a dot, it often looks better to make sure it's centered. Now that I have that stamp, we can start assembling our card. I have my background panel with the hole at the top, our leaf with the foam tape on the back, and then the dimension that we cut for behind it. I do have a piece of white cardstock here that is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. This is just a panel, but if you wanted to make this a card that opens normally, you could definitely use that. I'm putting glue on the back of our dimension and putting it right at the center of that white panel. Okay, now for the fun swing feature. I have our leaf die cut here with the foam tape on the back. I'll remove the release paper, put the whole of this panel around that foam tape. So there is exposed adhesive on that foam tape, and I put a circle die cut on that. Just make sure your circle die cut is bigger than that hole. Now this leaf can freely swing back and forth. Okay, so the last step is to glue this onto our dimension on our card panel. So I'm putting adhesive along that dimension that we created with that circle at the top. Then I can glue this down. Just make sure you don't put any glue on the back of that red circle die cut there. While that dries, I cut a hello sentiment from this Concord and 9th painted Petals die set. I have used this one an awful lot because I like that thank you and the hello. I think it's a nice size and it worked great for the leaf. I really like the die cut inlay on this leaf, so I decided to keep this simple and only add the hello to it, but I did add a few little pearls. Now I can swing this leaf out of the way and write my personal message behind it. So this again is a card panel. It doesn't open like a normal card. This is the personal message here hidden under the leaf. But you could do this feature on the front of a normal note card if you prefer. So here's a look at the completed card. You can see I added a few pearls to it. The leaf freely swings, so the person will definitely be able to tell that there is a message under there. I think it's fun to do unexpected cards like this once in a while. And here's a closer look at the detail of that die cut inlay with the leaf. I think that's just beautiful. It would be fun to do for different seasons too. You could do a spring one, you could do a winter one. This one I kind of did a fall look. Now remember earlier I made lots of leaves, right? Some were stamped, some were die cut. I thought I'd just walk through the different examples. On a lot of them I used the hello die cut because I really like that basic greeting because it can be used for many occasions. I added little pearls or gems also to the pattern that we created just because I like that bit of shine or dimension that it adds. I did use that plaid background stamp on most of the examples just because it was a quick way to add some interest to the background. Here's another one of the multicolored stamp leaves. I love that I was able to use so many colors, and I even on this one did some white pigment ink stamping too. So it's a fun way to create something colorful very quickly. On a few of the other cards that I'll be doing today, I used the You're So Kind from this Concord and 9th Seasonal Branches die set. This is another die set I use a lot because of the You're So Kind message and the thinking of you. So with these leaf examples, you can see how a large shaped die works great for this swing reveal card design. A large heart would work great, including that triple step heart that I mentioned in the other video. So look at different large shaped dies you have and see what would work for this technique too. I still have a few more leaf cards, but on these I used a really fun new stamp set for the sentiment, and I wanted to show you that. This is the Concord & 9th Mix and Match Everyday Sentiment Set. That stamp set there is one big stamp. You stamp that and then you use the die to cut it all out at once, and you'll end up with all these different words that you can build together in different ways for different sentiments. So I stamped the big block with black pigment ink, and then I added clear embossing powder to it and heat set it, and that made this really large, bold block of sentiments. Then you just use the coordinating die to line up with that, and it cuts all the words at once. I will definitely keep the extra words I don't use in this video so I can have them ready for another card in the future. And if you check out Concord & 9th's website, they do a bunch of different suggested sentiments you could put together. You can create some really long sentiments with these words, but I kept mine pretty small by only using 2 words together, so I didn't cover up too much of my stamping. I think of all the different versions, I really like these where there's the 3 different colors of metallic embossing powder. I think it looks really fun against those dark colors of cardstock that I used. And on this maroon one here, I did add a little gold bow behind the die cuts just for an added bit of interest, and then also some gold gemstones. So most of these cards are very simple, but you can add as much to it as you would want. Okay, my last 2 cards use a circle die for the swing portion. So this shows you can use basic shapes for this also. So I took the wreath and leaf clusters that I created earlier and used a large circle to die cut them. Now turning this into a swing card is very easy and just like we did earlier. So I have these 3 white squares with the circle cut from the top that I'm gluing together, and this will form that dimension just like before. Now this card ends up being about 5 inches by 5 inches in the end. So that white panel in the background that we'll glue this dimension onto is 5 by 5. Now that pool piece is about 4 3/4 by 4 3/4, and I die cut a small circle opening at the top. I'll take our large circle focal point and just lay that right center onto our panel. I'll hold it there, flip it over, and put that foam circle right in the opening. That's a great way to line it up. And then I can remove the release paper, add a larger circle die cut, and we have our swing. Now we can put glue on the dimension that we created here, and then lay our panel on top, just making sure not to put adhesive on that little circle die cut. And there we have our swing card. Doesn't take much work at all, and will work with lots of different shapes, including a circle like here. I like that the swing moves very freely, so when you take this out of the envelope, it'll move right away, which will allow the person to know there is something behind it to check out, which in my case is the personal sentiment. I did also add the You're So Kind to the center, and then a few pearls to it. I really wanted to keep today's cards very simple because I like the images so much and I wanted those to shine. And last but not least, we have another square card that's a bit bigger. It's about 5.5 by 5.5 inches. And I used the You're Wonderful right at the center of that leaf cluster. Again, I used a circle die to create that large swinging element. And it moves freely so the recipient will know to look behind the element as soon as they open the card. So you can see this is a fun technique to use with any large die cut. If you do not have large dies, you could also just cut a rectangle and make the rectangle swing. And remember, I still have a lot of die cut pieces left over from earlier that I could create some unique cards with. I always keep these extra pieces so that I have them on hand in the future, or if I just want to get my creative juices going, I can put these to use. All right, there you have a fun and easy technique. I hope you'll give this a try, especially using the supplies you already have. If you are interested in what I used, I do link them below in my YouTube description. At the end here, I'll have a couple other videos, including one that shows more examples of this swing reveal card technique. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.